research is definitely the way to go, okay? There are many advantages and disadvantages of secondary research that you need to be thinking about. So, for example, if you have observed something within your organisation and you think that there might be a trend happening, but you're not fully ready to invest in a full-blown research project, you might be thinking about conducting some desk research to help support that. The problems with conducting desk research only is that it's quite difficult to assess the quality of the data depending on where it's published. They're not answering your unique research question. So they might be answering part of your research question, but not completely. And you need to be thinking about the control over the quality of the data. So it could be that the results that they have come, or the conclusions that they've come up with, really resonate within your organisation, but you also need to interrogate what is behind those numbers and what process did they undertake in order to come up with those conclusions. So again, there is a lot of value to secondary research. I would use it all the time. I use it on an everyday basis. But you need to be thinking about the quality checks associated with it to make sure that you are not maybe using misinformation to report something. So maybe a topic slightly related to that was the meteorite that was found on Portmarnock Beach last week, whereby a science enthusiast found a big hole in the beach with a rock in the middle of it. He was convinced that it was a meteorite that had landed on Earth. It was reported on TV3 News, which would now go into the archives that we could use for our secondary research. But again, the next day they had to come back and report that it was actually a false alarm, that two men had dug the hole the day before. It was actually perfected, the hole, in the height of it. But again, the TV3 looked at a sensational story, didn't quality check or fact check what was happening, and we went into the news archive. So again, you need to be careful about even the most diligent of researchers might make mistakes and not fact check. So it's really important from a secondary research point of view that you fact check and you have a look at where the sources of information. I think I gave the example before about the Coca-Cola funding a research report that showed that fatty and sugary foods weren't linked to obesity, when actually there was hundreds, if not thousands, of research articles refuting that fact. But again, that was a research project that was funded by a company that had an invested interest in the findings. So, in order for us to evaluate the potential secondary sources, we need to look at the suitability of the data. So is it suitable to our organisation? How can we use it? Is it linked to our research aims and objectives? It could be the case, again, that only your secondary research only helps you answer part of your research aim, and that you want to expand it a little bit further. A lot of the academic studies that I would be involved in would actually start with a full-blown lit review, either a critical review or a systematic review. So systematic review is the gold standard in terms of reviewing the literature. You set out your protocol at the very start, you pick your keywords and you trawl through lots of different databases to get all the information, and then you analyse them using critical review. Mostly you'll probably be using critical reviews, but the same quality checks still arise. So we should be thinking about things like measurement validity, coverage including unmeasured variables. So what is being measured within the secondary data, and are they actually measuring what they said that they measured? So not only are we skipping to the conclusion part of it, which is the part that's most relevant to us, but we're looking at the methodology section and saying, okay, they went through this process, is it robust enough? What type of individuals did they sample in order to come up with these conclusions? So you're really interrogating the whole process and not just what you find out. Precise suitability of the data for analysis. So what about things like reliability and validity? So are they measuring what they say that they measure? And are there any measurement biases? So for example, are they skewed the population in which they're speaking to, or have they looked at the general population, or how have they defined their population characteristics? What databases or what tools or techniques do they use for sampling? If they're looking at a broad marketing problem, did they go out to the general public to find the answers, or do they just use their own databases, which could have been maybe skewed? And again, assessment of costs. So sometimes the costs the costs outweigh the benefits in terms of doing research. So again, you might have to rely on secondary research. If you're only doing secondary research to inform your decision, again, I would really highly suggest you triangulate. So you try and find more than one source that says the same thing to justify your argument. The things that you need to be looking out for, again, is how was it collected? Why is it collected? So what was the purpose of the first organisation collecting it? When was it collected? Why was it published? How dependable is the data source? And who conducted the research would be another one. When it was conducted, again, is really beneficial to you. So again, if you're doing something in digital marketing that's really fast-paced, even if you're looking at something that was published 10 years ago, it's probably out of date by now, depending on what it is. So again, you need to have that argument in your head about the recency and the relevancy of it. Whereas if you're looking at a different area of marketing, maybe supply chain management or something, older articles could be more relevant. When you're conducting your literature research, you look at internal and external journal sources. So if you're working for an organisation, you can use internal documents. And again, you go from your general to specific. So you use the funnel rule where you're starting off really broad and you're narrowing it down. And there are people that can help you. So for example, there are librarians in the library here that will help you with database searches if you struggle with it. There's also resources in the library, the LARC network, or it used to be called LARC, where it helps you with your writing skills and your research skills. Things like referencing. And actually, that reminds me, at the break, a couple of people come to me with confusion over the first assignment. On your instructions, it says you have to use a business database, but again, because we haven't done the training yet, I've broadened that out to any source of information, but it has to be a high quality source of information, perhaps a journal article. And you're using that as a starting point for your very brief problem definition and an outline of your SMART objectives. Okay, so Herrick in 2004 created this or discussed this 5 criteria to help support the validity of information. And again, in the time when we have so much information and it comes at us very quickly, it's important that we think about the certain criteria to help quality check the research that we are undertaking. So accessibility is always a big issue. So again, they call it the seduction of convenience and abundance. So if you put any keyword into Google search, you will come up with thousands upon thousands of returned results, depending on what it is. Just because it's coming up in a Google search doesn't mean that it is relevant to your topic, and doesn't mean that it's all quality data. So that's something that you really, really have to think about whenever you're doing your searches. By all means, click on the most relevant topic that you, or the most relevant article that you find. But in order for you to get quality data, you have to make sure that your keywords are correct. So they have to say nonsense out. So you think about, okay, what keywords are going to be most relevant to me within this search in order for us to make a decision on this data. Consistency, so with both internal and internally, and it should be externally. You may find competing views. Competing views are actually good because they help you form and craft your argument. Okay, so if I was finding 100% positive articles on something, I would be saying, okay, is there a problem with my keywords, because there has to be something negative associated with this. So I would pilot my keyword terms or search terms and see what's coming up. And again, looking at the searches that are coming back for consistency. Relevancy, does the evidence provided have any bearing on the argument? So again, when you put in a search term, you could come up with thousands of articles, but are they actually relevant to what you're trying to find out? And unfortunately, you're going to have to read the articles to try and figure that out. So again, you need to have some kind of assessment criteria of whether it's relevant. Recency, so when was it created? Again, unfortunately, with the fast pace that we're moving, some articles become outdated quite quickly. And in some topics, there's very little out there. So if you think about the metaverse and Web 4.0, last year there would have been very little published on the metaverse because people didn't really understand what it was. A lot of the research that would have been coming out of the metaverse was being led by industry as opposed to industry leaders as opposed to anybody else. We didn't understand it. So again, when was it created and who created it? Why did they create it? Are they creating these things to build up their own databases and to get you to sign up to their mailing list? Is the amount of evidence sufficient to support the claim? And again, this goes back to what actually happened or what they are saying that they are doing within the paper. So if you're reading a article that talks about a survey, but it doesn't take you through how the survey was collected, what the sampling was like, who did they sample, when did they sample, answer those kind of questions, I would be questioning the report and trying to interrogate it a little bit further. And that goes for whenever you get, for example, press releases or something's reported in the media. If you're using a media article, usually if they're talking about something like a survey, they'll have a link to the original source. It's really important to track backwards to the original source to try and get as much information on what is being reported as possible. Because for news articles, they can only report on a certain amount of information. So if they're reporting on an academic study, they can only present a certain proportion of it. So it's really important that you go back and you look at the original source to see what's happening. So there are problems with secondary sources and these need to be acknowledged. So definitions are really important. So what is it that you are defining as a topic? Just because you use the keyword doesn't mean that somebody else is using the keyword to mean the same thing. And so, for example, they give an example here that researchers are interested in rural communities and their average family size. Depending on where you are in the world, family sizes can be quite different. So how do you actually define that? And then what implications does that have for your actual search terms? Measurement error. So are they reporting on the things that, the processes that were undertaken as part of this research? So things like sampling and non-sampling errors. So what kind of actions did they take? Errors that invalidate the sample or the data. So for example, was there any missing data? And what implications does that have? How was the data captured? Who captured? When was it captured? And would the data have to be reformulated because of what happened during the processing of it? We talked about sampling and non-sampling error. So sampling error occurs when the sample chosen by the researcher doesn't accurately reflect the total population. So this is particularly relevant if it's a quantitative study, whereby they might have sampled a subsection of the population that's going to introduce bias into the sample. So again, you need to really think about sampling, and sampling is a big issue. And that leads me on to the sampling for your assignment, which is also an issue every year. You need to be give as much information as possible on how you would intend to sample the population if you were going to conduct this research in the real world. You need to think about what errors can invalidate the data, again, because of actions and attitudes of people undertaking it. You need to think about who's funding it, why they funded it, and how they're presenting the information. And then finally, we're looking at changing circumstances, inappropriate transformations, inappropriate temporal extrapolations, inappropriate temporal recognitions, and these are all linked to sampling, data collection, and analysis. So again, the kind of the main takeaway point is don't take the research that you find in secondary sources at face value. Do your own interrogation in relation to it. And I'm not going to go through this section. I just wanted to bring your attention to a couple of these slides because Christopher is going to take us through them in the next couple of weeks. So there's loads of different types of records available to us. So sales records, government documents, state bodies, trade bodies, environment sources, syndicate sources, grey material. Grey material is information that's published by an industry or by a company that they publish themselves and maybe is not peer reviewed. Or white paper. Social media can be a really good source of information, and we'll talk about that now in a couple of weeks when we're talking about ethnography. It can be really, really, really useful. However, you need to be able to do your quality checking in your social media posts as well. And then just in terms of how we use secondary data, so secondary data can be really useful within frameworks. Again, I'm not going to go into these in detail, but they are important for your project because you should have covered these before. One could be external market analysis. So secondary data can be really important for whenever you're taking your PESTEL. So looking at your political, economic, ecological, social and technological factors and how that might impact on the organisation. Your SWOT analysis, which is more your internal analysis, so your strengths, weaknesses and opportunities and threats within the organisation. You have your target market research, your competitor analysis and your target market research. What is wrong with this? Sorry. So your competitive analysis, helps you identify who your competitors are. They help you benchmark your competitors. Your target market research will help you answer some of these questions. We're looking at opportunities within your marketplace, your unique selling points, your KPIs, your competitors. And again, just to end on the point that you shouldn't believe everything just because it's published. So this is an article that was published in the Daily Mail. Anyone here familiar with the Daily Mail? Yeah. So the Daily Mail would be kind of like a tabloid newspaper, and here it says they published an article that save thousands on your wedding costs by accepting that nobody gives a rude word. But what they did was that they had these experts in the article that talked about how to save money with your wedding. But they actually used Waterford Whispers, which is a satirical newspaper, as the source for the article. So it was a made-up story published in a tabloid newspaper. So again, be very careful about the sources of information that you use and how you use them. And I'm just going to finish up there. So this section, and we're all finished. Any questions on secondary research?
So how do you go about what's the competition? So first, is it based on how do you go about it?
So if I was doing a research project, depending on the topic, I would be starting with academic journals. Okay, there are 4 academic journals that are really important in marketing. You should know what they are. The Library of Institute and Crisco through them. So the likes of Marketing Theory, there's digital marketing journals, and each section of marketing has its own kind of core journals. So for me, my research area is the Journal of Social Marketing and the Social Marketing Course. Those are the 2 kind of top ones. For me, you also have the European Journal of Marketing, Service Marketing, so those different journals. If it's industry relevant papers that I'm looking for, I will be looking to see, okay, what organisation are publishing this information. So Deloitte will publish a lot of good articles, KPMG, those kind of things. I would also acknowledge that they're usually trying to sell you a product. Okay, so again, if that's the case, it doesn't necessarily discredit what they're saying, but you need to know their motivations for saying it. And what I'd be looking to say, Deloitte said something, I would try and triangulate that source from something else. So it's just Deloitte that's saying it, it's KPMG saying it, or what are the industry papers or industry articles in marketing saying about it, those types of Marketing News, Marketing Weekly, those types of things. Again, I would use a lot of the Wall Street Journal for my repeat business, Harvard Business Review. But again, you need to be careful because some of those articles are editorials, and if you reach to the very end, they'll show you where the person works and their motivations for doing it. And some of them are just reporting on academic papers. So what I would say is you can't take everything at face value. The problem with peer-reviewed journals as well is that there are different tiers of peer-reviewed journals. So we have our criteria within business. We have our ABS ranking. So ABS ranking is 4-star, 3-star, 2-star, 1-star papers. It becomes more complicated because the area that I work in, their papers are only 2-star, but they're the best that there's going to be. You also have what we call predator journals now, where people can pay to get stuff published and they don't go through the rigorous peer-reviewed process. So you just need to be really careful about the quality of it. And it is difficult, but the more you do it, the things that you begin to recognise, the names of key authors in an area. So if there's a digital marketing, digital marketing event, digital marketing. So there are people that, say for example, Patricia would always quote, I can't think of any of them now. What kind of people does she talk about? Like there has been a lot of discussion about blog articles in marketing, and I do see a place for blogs, but it's the quality check around it that becomes quite problematic. I would use things like TED Talks are really, really good. RT News, BBC News, kind of the news outlets that have a good reputation. I would avoid papers like the Daily Mail, for example, and the Sun newspaper, the Mirror. And if I was to find any information in those articles that I read, that is actually a bit interesting. I'd go back to the original source. So if they're talking about a survey, go back and say, okay, who published the survey and why? Does that make sense? Does that answer your question? So it takes practice, and you'll see that yourself whenever you're doing your research report, that you might find loads of information, but you need to make sure that the information that you're finding is relevant. Keywords are really important. When I'm doing my secondary research, I would start off with a number of different keywords, and the more specific your keywords are, the more specific your search is going to be, and that helps with the quality. It kind of helps pull out some of the quality issue. Make sense? Yeah. Any other? It depends.
Depends on the channel.
It's changing the channel. It depends on the publisher. I don't like to discount the kind of emerging sources. Like they are really, really important pieces of information. But it's just the motivation behind why are people publishing. Some people just like to share knowledge within areas to boost their own success. There's other ones that are trying to sell products and services, and they're creating these needs where there's no need for them. There might be as much demand as they're trying to generate. But yeah, think about who's publishing it, why are they publishing it. There's loads of nice conference papers. Conference papers are really good for generating arguments. They're not as robust because they're not as peer reviewed. They give you insight into what's coming out there and what's happening in the space. Yeah, if you're having YouTube, just think about who's publishing.
So source that channel person is actually quoting, that's the source that we need to refer to.
The channel as well as the person that's talking. So you'll have, so I would use a lot of sources for like other academics might have guest lecturers, and they're a really good source of information. And I'll be showing you a video now in the next couple of weeks from Dripping.com, which is phenomenal insight you're using this information to make decisions in your business, you have to be sure that you can stand over every single one of them. And especially if you're going to stand up in front of a board of directors, you need to have the evidence. And they'll ask you, where did this come from? And who did it? And they will quite be knowledgeable of you about the influential people in that sphere. And they'll start questioning about it, and you want to make sure that you have the right answers. Does that make sense? So it is difficult when it comes to practice. And so this is the start of the practice for you. Any other questions before we finish up this section? Again, we'll come back to it in a couple of weeks when Christopher comes in to talk to us. Is that alright? Yeah, yourself?
Hi, it's kind of a general question, but I saw this a TikTok that said, like, it's just this girl talking about her struggles with researching, and she was saying that she's gone through quite a bit of her paper, and she suddenly found a paper that is quite the same of what she's trying to prove.
Yeah.
The theory what she wanted to prove in her paper has already been published, but she's found that paper way late.
Yeah.
So she's just struggling and she just doesn't know what to do. What would you do in that scenario?
But is it the same context? So is there something different? So even if, so we, a couple of years ago, we spent a long time doing a systematic review. We literally had it finished and it was published in, it wasn't the exact same, it was very, very similar. What we needed to do was look at what knowledge gaps we were looking at and what contributions that we're making to theory and practice. I think it's really important to have contributions to both. So if there's a research paper that's just been published, you can use that. You can say, okay, well, this is what they found. My sample size is this, which is way beyond what theirs was. I'm looking at this specific context, and this is what their context. So you can, don't be disheartened, but you need to make a decision. Is it worth carrying on, or can you, depending on what stage you're at in the research, can you evolve at that stage? Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
It's very disheartening, but unfortunately that's research. And you have to be, because I was working on another topic, was it last year, and it was doing metaverse, really, really interesting, and then a systematic review was published in the same topic, so I just didn't continue with it because the findings were there, and there wasn't that, it was a very confined topic, so there wasn't that much there. So it depends on how specialised your topic is. Is that right?
Thank you. Yeah.
Okay, we're going to move on quickly to research design. Okay, so research design. So the learning outcomes of this topic are really, and this subject is a lot more funner after this topic, okay? There'll be a lot more interaction going forward, because we're going to be moving on to actually looking at the methods and techniques after next week, okay? So here we're going to look at the differences, but we're introducing quantitative and qualitative data here, mixed methods, approaches, and the reasons why you choose different research designs, okay? So we've gone from starting off really, really broad to narrowing it down. We've done our aims and objectives, we've done some of our secondary research, and now we're thinking about, okay, how can we go about trying to design the research study that suits our needs. Okay. So, what is qualitative research? Can anyone tell me what qualitative research is? Yeah.
The qualitative research is about the topics that cannot be quantified at first. It's mostly about the behavior or emotions or the reactions as such, or something that we cannot quantify or maybe put a dollar value as such.
Yeah. So it's something that we want to talk about really in depth. It's something that we don't want to necessarily generalise to the population, but we want to find out a lot more. We want to explore what it needs. We want to think about feelings. We want to think about behaviours. We want to think about motivations. These are things that are very difficult to quantify. So if you ask somebody in a survey, what is your motivation for buying your car, and you're getting them to tick the box, it's very refined. You're not finding out the nuances around their motivations. Whereas if you have a conversation with somebody, and you're trying to figure out why they bought that car, they'll tell you because when you sit into the car, it's the feeling of the seat, it's the smell within the car, it's how you feel when you're driving down the motorway. So there's loads of different things that or insights that can come out of those conversations, which are more difficult to capture in quantitative research. So quantitative research, when we're thinking about, we're trying to differentiate between related to quantity, and it's very much related to measurement, survey design, and analysis of numbers. Okay, and that's the way that you can kind of think about them in your own head. So today we're looking at the differences between them, but more specifically, we're looking at how that impacts on the differences between different research designs that we have. So there are number ones that we're looking at: exploratory, descriptive, explanatory, and evaluation research design. And again, the design that you choose will have an impact on the types of methods that you're going to be talking about over the next couple of weeks. And it's important that we understand the criteria for both qualitative, quantitative, and the different research designs that we choose. So overall, your research methods or your research design is a framework. So we talked about this idea that our research output is linked to a framework or a blueprint, whereby we are taking a step-by-step process in order to conduct our research. With the caveat that it might be a step-by-step process, but it's also an iterative process. So you can go forward and back between stages depending on what happens. So if you're in the middle of doing a research project and then you realise that there's another paper that has been published in this area, you might have to go back up a few steps to try and figure out, okay, what is my contribution going to be, and to both to theory and practice. And again, this is really, really important. When you're deciding whether you're going to conduct research either primary or secondary, you need to think about, okay, what is my contribution? What is it that I am adding, and how am I adding value to my organisation, either by conducting primary research or secondary research. So, if you were, so the person sitting beside you, have a think about, you have noticed a decrease in online sales recently. People are putting items into the online shopping cart but not following through on the process. What should you do? So just with the person beside you for 2 minutes, think about what steps you would take to try and interrogate this marketing problem a little bit more.
To be honest, it sounds like they're waiting for a sale.
Honestly, like in Nykaa, they kind of put everything in the cart, and when it's Pink Friday, they just.
I think there are many other factors. They research on another factor and decide the price lower. That's true.
Okay, let's just find Pink Friday. They could be just comparing prices. That's true.
You can think about economic perspective. Is there a rise or fall in disposable income? What are the products that we are selling? If it's a luxury product, and if there is inflationary condition in the market, people are not buying. How is the economic condition of the particular market? That is very important. And then secondly, we will see if there are any sales coming up in my company. People are waiting for it. So they are sitting in the garden, they are refreshed to it. Thirdly, I will see if there is any new competitor that came up in the market and he is bring good deals. So these are the factors I will analyze. But first and foremost, I will just get the numbers. By what percentage is my sale falling down? And how is the market? Is it inflation? Is it deflation? These two things very important.
I would consider the number of products
like
left.
people are discussing
Only
that they
45
might be
left
waiting for the
by
sale, but it could also be a UX problem.
Okay?
So sometimes when you're checking out, like the website layout is really good, but when you're checking out, they ask for too much information, and people get bored, and they will like, okay, let me just find the same product on Amazon on alternate app that I have in my phone and just get that done with it.
Yeah.
And at times when it's a new brand, it could be lack of trust as well. Maybe the initial customers that you met were retargeted, but the drop in it, if it is coming from, I'm assuming it's coming from social media, those are the first time clicks. So we have to check like where the customers are coming from.
Okay, so far you've mentioned that there could be sales going on in the external environment, or that you're waiting for the sales to happen in your environment. You're talking about trust within the organisation, and you're talking about the overall user experience and different elements related to that. So how do you know which one it is?
Oh, the backend data. The GA would be easily, we'll be able to find out like what is the bounce rate, and then you go back into the source report and you just easily be able to find out that, oh, is this a first time click or is it a return user? If it is entirely website, we can corely target from GA, and also if it is a Shopify store or Facebook data. We have 3 sources, we'll funnel it down to the course.
Okay, does everyone agree? First port of call will be going to your analytics. Yes, no? Yeah? So you might start with your analytics, yeah? What does it not tell you? What does your analytics not tell you? What does your Google Analytics, your Shopify information not tell you?
Maybe the UX experience, you need another tools for that.
Yeah?
Like the heat mapping, maybe?
Yes. So it doesn't actually tell you the why. It tells you what is happening. It tells you, it helps you diagnose the problem. So it can tell you, okay, you're getting this far and the bounces are, they're either clicking through or they're not. But it doesn't tell you the motivations, it doesn't tell you the actions, the experiences, what is happening within that environment that's actually stopping them from going to the next stage. You had your hand up?
I think,
sorry, go ahead.
I think the payment methods will also be a problem. Maybe there are not enough payment methods for the customer to pay for the product.
What, sorry?
I think there may be online shop.
That's what I did.
Online company does not have enough payment methods for the customer to pay. That would be a problem. So maybe that will find out what kind of payment methods they have ways to use to pay out and then check out.
Okay, so you're talking about payment methods now. Again, another valid issue that could be an issue. How do you know that it's the payment methods and not the anticipated sales that they think is coming in 2 weeks' time that's causing these bounce rates?
You have to know the customers in the environment. What kind of payment methods they have? They use card payment, they have transfer, what kind of process they use, what kind of platforms they also use.
Yeah.
You have to find out if you also offer those services on your website.
Yeah. So really, really valid. But again, does it tell us the entire picture? What insight have we used? What knowledge do we know that's drilling it down to the payment? And how can we find further information? Does that make sense? So that's one insight that comes from your experience as a marketer. But is it happening within the actual shop at the time? You want to say something?
Free shipping, you can have free shipping options. You can have your offer sections or coupon sections in the checkout process. Also addition of new CTAs, which includes menu offers and combo offers specifically, which like if you are buying 2 for 50 for example, you can get 3 at 70 such offers, promotional offers, or some exit offers can be there. Also your product images can be shown besides the products just as a CTA button, so customer can drive more products into just like in cross-selling. So if a customer is intending to buy one product, he can buy 2 or 3 products. So that can increase your sales by almost 1x or 2x if you are having that CTAs in your checkout process.
Okay, so you're using the insight again as your digital marketing experience to try and interrogate the problem. What insight do you have that that's actually the problem that they're having in this situation?
From this statement, we don't have that insight. We have to figure that out by reaching out to our customers or potential customers or making a form and sending it over to email to figure that out. All of this, what people have been talking about, is great, but it's purely done after the fact that we realize what the actual problem is.
Yeah, and we can use the analytics that our first student talked about to try and interrogate it further. So we can see exactly the pattern of behaviour on the website. Again, we don't know if it's necessary to do the loyalty cards. We don't know if it's necessary to do with the payment. So we need to interrogate it a little bit more. And sometimes that will involve us going back to our internal data to try and figure it out. And other times, after we've gone back to our internal data, we're like, okay, we actually have to interrogate this a little bit more with some primary research of our own. So in order for us to do that, we need to think about, okay, how are we going to design this? So we need to design our research project that fits within the resources of our organisation. Some organisations will have a lot of money to to spend on research, others won't. So if you take Aerogen as an example, they really value primary research on the ground to try and understand their customers. They can actually see the return on investment from speaking to their customers, trying to understand their customers, their motivations, how they work with the product, and how the supply chain works. And they can connect that back to sales. So it's really important that we, as researchers and as marketers, think about how we're going to design our product, our research approach. So here we have two designs. So we have our exploratory research design versus our conclusive research design. Conclusive research designs are more kind of closed. They, as I said, that they're more conclusive in their nature, depending on how they have been rolled out into the environment. And within conclusive research designs, we have descriptive research as well as causal research. And as we interrogate our descriptive research, we have our cross-sectional design versus our longitudinal design. Cross-sectional design is a research study that takes place at one point in time. So it could be a survey that we are undertaking in September 2023, and it's something that we might repeat again. Longitudinal study is where we take multiple different time points and we can look at what's happening in the environment over them. So for example, in Safe Food, they like to monitor their brand and how their campaigns are performing, and they will run a longitudinal study, and they'll run the same survey. Well, the survey is 90% the same on an annual basis. The difference being they might have more campaign-specific messaging in the surveys, but their core questions remain the same. So when we talk about branding, when we talk about brand recall, when we talk about brand associations, all those questions will be the same, and they will run them at the same point in time every year, so that they know that I can't remember when they run. I think it's in March. That they can look at what's happening in the environment around them, and they can account for that within the survey that they've undertaken. You might have a single cross-sectional design, which means that you're only doing it kind of with one cohort of people, but you also might have a multiple cross-sectional design, which means that you're only doing it in one point in time, but you might be doing it with many different cohorts of people. So in terms of the difference between exploratory and conclusive research, the main difference is that exploratory research, if you think of the word explore, you're looking at things broader and more in depth, so you provide insight and understanding. So if you're exploring the problem that we just put up on the board, you'll get an idea of the motivations and the rationale between the customer's decision making. Whereas if you want conclusive to test specific hypotheses and examine relationships, you can choose one of the suggestions here. So you can choose to expand the payment section, the payment section on maybe a specific number of customer websites and see if it makes a difference. You could try and introduce different loyalty program schemes over different points in time, test whether they make a difference, and then you can roll it out through the wider channels. In terms of the characteristics of exploratory research, the information needed is only loosely defined. So you have the room to listen to the consumer, and you can be more flexible and unstructured in the nature of the research within the scope of the aims and objectives. Your sample size is smaller and non-representative, so you're never going to generalize this research to the entire population. Your findings are tentative, so you may have to do some more inclusive research afterwards to try and see, okay, now we know that this is the motivations, but is it generalizable to the population? And the outcome is usually you're following up with some other type of research. In terms of conclusive, you're testing a hypothesis. So you're looking at different observable variables, and you're seeing that if you change one of those variables, that's going to have an impact on your overall sales. You need to make sure that you are very clear in your definition of your information needs and what you're trying to decipher. Without that definition, you're going to run into a lot of problems both whenever you are trying to develop your survey, but also to analyse it. You're going to have a larger, more representative sample, so sampling becomes a major issue here and something, a major consideration that you need to think about. And your analysis is going to be quantitative in nature, so you're going to have to work with some kind of statistics, either descriptive or more kind of exploratory. And your findings are used to input decision making. And it's not that you don't use these findings for decision making, but again, it's just more conclusive in nature. Okay, so we're going to pick up on this next week. We're going to go through, next week we're going to cover research design, and we're going to cover sampling as well. I'm going to put examples for aims and objectives up on Canvas for you. Please don't copy them. Have you any questions before we wrap up?